I'm Clive Hambler. I'm the Director of Studies at Hertford for Human Sciences. And we have Josephine here who can introduce herself.
Okay, hi, I'm Josephine. I just finished my third year as a human scientist.
Right, so I'm going to say a little bit about human sciences in Hertford particularly, and then say a little bit about the course and a little bit about interviews. And hopefully cover many questions. But if there are questions unresolved at the end of that, then people can get in touch with our admissions office. So thanks very much for your interest in human sciences in Hertford. So I'm called the Director of Studies for Human Sciences at Hertford, but my job is called different things in different colleges. Sometimes it's called organising tutor. And it basically means that I help organise the students in that subject rather than just teach them. I teach ecology, I do conservation, and I also teach a little bit of animal behaviour and evolution. But my main job as Director of Studies, where you admitted, would be to organise teaching with other tutors. So human sciences have a big pool of tutors across the university, and people in all colleges basically see people from that pool. It doesn't really matter which college you're in, you get to see many tutors from other colleges, and most of your teaching will be done in different colleges and in different departments around the university. So what college you're at doesn't make any difference really to your course. And all the lectures are shared, and there are some practicals and things, and they're all shared across the colleges. So I would help admit you and then mentor you through the 3 years of the course, help with practice exams and things like that. And then probably write references for some years after you graduate, looking for things like MScs or PhDs or jobs. So we try and help our graduates long into the future after they've left. So I thought I'd say a little bit about what we do at Hertford for human sciences. It may be a bit different to other colleges, but I would stress that all colleges are really good for human sciences. So what we do is try and integrate the human sciences with the students in biology and with biochemistry, and we call that the life sciences family. And those subjects, those degree subjects, have overlap in things like genetics or evolution or ecology or animal behavior. So it's nice to have a big team of both students and teachers working on similar subjects in the college. But we don't just have sort of academic seminars and meetings. We try and have social events where we mix people from those subjects together when we have dinners and things. We have a thing called the Darwin's Dinner, and we also invite people who've graduated in those subjects back to that for not just a dinner, but a careers talk, and to hear what some of our graduates have gone on to do and help maybe tell people how they got into their jobs and whether they find them interesting or not. So we try and mix also with people from archaeology and anthropology, another degree subject in the college. And there's also overlap with medicine. So, I mean, Josephine, did you find it quite successful to meet people in these other degrees?
Yeah, especially as human sciences tends to be quite a small cohort within Hertford. It's nice to have events where you get to meet other students properly, and also your tutors overlap as well. So you'll share, our genetics tutor is shared with the biologists and biochemists. So yeah, it's fun. The events are pretty good.
So I mean, there's usually only a few human sciences in any college, aren't there, Josephine?
Yeah, I think the most is up to 6, but Hertford tends to usually have around 3, which makes it nice because you have tutorials in a group, often all 3 of you together, and that can range from either 3 of you to one-on-one, but it means that you have people to work with throughout your degree. So that's nice.
As you go through the degree, you start to work with people from other colleges sometimes in tutorials and tutorial classes, because as you go through the degree, you get more and more choice. And some people in your own college might be choosing different subjects to you. So you ended up with people from various colleges, I guess, in your tutes and classes.
Yeah, so that depends more about what options you choose in third year. Which if you have a detailed look at the syllabus, you can see that, but you choose your first option in second year, and then you have a bit more choice in third year on choosing specific subjects that you want to look at.
Thank you. So as you can imagine, human sciences is such a remarkable broad degree. it takes a huge amount of organising. So much of my time as directors of study is coordinating rather than teaching. I might only teach a few hours in total in your whole 3 years in my subjects, but a huge amount of time is spent swapping tutorials with other tutors. So I teach my ecology to people from other colleges. In exchange, I can get students at Hertford taught sociology or genetics or physiology with tutors in other colleges. And in fact, many of the tutors have no colleges at all. But basically, it's a lot of swapping around, and it's a lot of effort to coordinate. And I think that's one of the reasons why many universities don't do human sciences. It's just a practical challenge to do that. And you need lots of big departments in lots of different subjects to make it work. So I thought I'd say a little bit about the admissions process, and just to re-emphasize things that you can see on websites, or if you go to the university admissions site, and they will tell you that you don't need to choose a college, and don't worry about choosing a college. And the most important thing to stress is that it doesn't matter what college you choose or whether you don't choose a college at all. You'll get the same chance of acceptance however you apply to Oxford, whether it's as what they call an open application where you don't specify a college, or whether you were to choose, say, Hertford. But the quality of teaching will be the same in all the colleges, and whatever college you end up at. Many people end up at a college that they've not even seen. So it's important to realise that the educational quality is the same. What does vary a bit, though, is the cost. So unlike some of my colleagues in some colleges, I would actually recommend that people do make a bit of effort to choose a college if that concerns them. So if you can look at lots of different college websites, and you can look at whether they will charge you for meals, whether you eat them or not, whether they can accommodate you for all 3 years, because that's very important if you want to save money. If you have to live out of a college in unsubsidized private accommodation for a year, then Oxford is quite an expensive place to live. And there are various other things like bursaries and hardship grants, and some colleges have more resources for those than others. So it's worth doing a bit of exploration of what might the financial implications be of a college, as well as looking perhaps at its location. And if you wander around Oxford, you get a feel for whether you like the look of the place, I suppose. But you can also do that online. It's hard to tell really from the outside or from the inside what sort of room you'll get, because some colleges may look old, but they have some very modern accommodation, and it's a bit potluck what you get in any college. Would you say that's true, Josephine?
Yes, definitely. Hertford's nice though, because you do get 3 years of accommodation, and your first year should be on site, which means that you're in the centre of Oxford. So Hertford's location is definitely one of its strong points.
Sorry,
Yeah.
go on.
Oh, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say, go on. You were on a roll.
But when I applied to Hertford, I applied to Hertford specifically, so I chose it as my college. But I ended up receiving an open offer, which means that I didn't know where I was going to be. So my parents and I took a trip around Oxford, touring the 8 or 9 various different colleges that human sciences is offered. And I can tell you, I was happy wherever I was going to go at that stage. So yeah, college choice is important if you have a strong desire, but it's not the be all end all. And lots of people end up loving the college that they get selected for or pooled to.
People get very loyal to whatever college they end up.
Yeah.
So it's not something to agonize about. So for admissions, I would be one of the people who would do the interview, and there would always be 2 academics doing the interview in the room with you. And typically they would be from different subjects, and everybody applying to human sciences gets interviewed by 2 colleges. And then occasionally people go to see what's called the Human Sciences Panel, which is a group of 3 tutors from 3 different subjects and 3 different colleges. And they are helping to make sure that the best people get placed somewhere in the university. So this is an extremely good, I think it's one of the best systems actually for getting candidates distributed across colleges, no matter where they first applied or where they were first interviewed. So we put a huge amount of effort into the redistribution of candidates, and very occasionally that can mean that although you do choose a college, we have to send you first to a different college, and you may not see the one you chose. It's quite rare that happens, but it's again making absolutely sure that we can get the most of people who deserve it into places. So I would be one of the people doing the interviews, and the subjects that I ask may be nothing to do with what I teach, and this will be true in other colleges. So it doesn't matter as far as choosing a college goes, both for your interview and your teaching, what the subject of the academics research is. So interviews would typically ask a little bit about things that you're interested in, which we can tell from your personal statement. But I then tend to just wing it, and the conversations can just go off in all sorts of directions. And the main thing we're looking for is whether you would enjoy and work well in the tutorial system. So a very special thing about Oxford, as I'm sure you realise, is the tutorial system. And we want to find people where we can really add value through that system. So if you don't enjoy the interview, there's a good chance you really wouldn't enjoy having something rather similar week on week in tutorials. I don't know if that's your experience, Josephine, whether the tutorials did do a little bit like the interview.
Yeah, it definitely has been. And that's one of the biggest things I would say as advice. If you enjoy the interview, you're going to enjoy Oxford. And I know that interviews can be very nerve-wracking for candidates, and tutors understand that. So they, a lot of the time, won't be looking for you to get the exact right answer, but more about how you think and whether you can show how you're thinking throughout an interview.
Yes, thank you.
So, yeah.
So, I mean, that's a really important point, Josephine, that we're not looking for a right answer. We're just looking at the thought processes and the logic that you use. And in a way, seeing if you're thinking like some of the students that are already here, and also like some of our colleagues. We're interested in whether you're showing some of the questioning abilities and problem-solving abilities that you could use in academia, but are very valuable in other careers. So we're looking at people who can be critical and original and creative, but in a non-stressful way. And we're looking for you doing your best. We're not trying to trip you up and see you do your worst. So we try and help you all the way through the interview. And if some area is proving too difficult, we just move on to something else, and we'll always cover a lot of ground. So I thought I might just briefly show you a couple of the sorts of things that I've asked in interviews in the past, and then I'll never be able to use them again. But it, I hope, illustrates that these are topics that you could talk about, you know, in the garden or the pub or something like that, and they would be fun. So they shouldn't be really stressful things to talk about. So one example would be this bag from the Amazon, sort of stringy bag, and a rather similar one, but you know, rather more cloth-like. And you know, they're both shoulder bags with long straps, and they were sold to tourists. But I'd be interested to know if they were really genuine craft work from Amazonian peoples, or whether maybe as a tourist I'm just being conned a bit, and these have been imported from somewhere, and I bought them because they looked what I thought to be authentic. So I asked the student or the candidates in that year, well, how could I tell perhaps if these were authentic Amerindian art? And it was quite interesting, the sort of things that they came up with. You could look to see whether they had exotic chemicals, or one person suggested they might have labels in, all sorts of things like that. So there were all sorts of answers I hadn't expected at all. So you can think about that at your leisure at some time if you want. And then the other thing is, it's often easy to think that this stringy one is the more authentic bag. And maybe it's because I've seen something like that on TV, or I don't know, but I asked, why might the stringiness be actually useful in a bag? What extra functions could it have that this more solid cloth-like bag doesn't have? So as I say, I don't know the answer to that, but it's quite often the case that you get stringy bags in different groups of people around the world. And then another question that I asked might seem a bit more bizarre. So you can perhaps see this lump of metal, and it's actually part of a car. And you can maybe see, I hope you can see, that the middle part spins. So this is basically a type of joint that goes round and round and round and round and round, and it can go either direction. And that's like no joint in the human body, or so far as I know, in the animal kingdom. So I said, why might it be that that sort of wheel-like joint hasn't evolved in any other species or in any species? And what is the nearest joint to that in, say, the human body? So lots of people think, oh, well, maybe it's a little bit like the neck or a little bit like the shoulder or something. But there's an obvious difference in that those joints can't go round and round and round without terrible things happening. So it may be that it's biologically impossible to make a joint that rotates fully. But I asked the candidates, well, is there any way that you could try and make it work? You know, if you were using biological materials, how you could get that 360-degree motion. Let's assume that there might be a selective advantage for an owl to maybe turn its head round and round and round, or for a monkey to be able to rotate its arm completely. If there was an advantage, how could you get, say, the blood across without tearing up all the blood vessels and things? How would you get nerves and muscles to work across a rotating joint? So that question, I also have used it in the past when I was interviewing medics, and I've used it when I was interviewing biologists, and there's no right answers. But it's also the sort of question that if you read about in a book of Oxford interviews, or if you were to see listed as an interview question, you might think it's really bizarre. You know, they showed me a lump of metal from a car's engine and asked me to talk about it. But if you saw it in context with me working you through the problem, then you could see that it's not so scary. And that's a really crucial thing about Oxford interviews. If you've been put off by some of the stories you've seen, then basically don't worry about them too much. So did you find the interviews, you know, very stressful, and or you know, did you enjoy it, Josephine?
Yes, I really enjoyed it. I had my first one at Hertford, and then I had a second one at St. Hugh's before being pulled to the panel interview. And in my St. Hugh's interview, it was very challenging, but it was interesting because I had a question on if aliens came down to Earth, how could you explain to the aliens, out of a lineup of species, which one was human? And again, there was no right answer. And it actually started a discussion for about, I'd say, 5 to 10 minutes, which was really interesting because you can talk about a various number of topics here, and you don't have to be restricted. But then again, the interviewers helped guide me to an answer, which is very much about the human sciences, is drawing connections between disciplines. So if you can show that you're interested in several aspects of the human sciences in your interview, that's a great thing.
I can see why they chose you. So, basically, it's like a tutorial. In the tutorial, you'll be given help all the way through as well. So anyway, I think that we don't want to sort of make this a very long video. And we haven't said a lot about the course structure, but basically the first year is compulsory. The second year, you get a choice between just a couple of subjects. But in the third year, you basically choose from a very wide range of options, and you're choosing a dissertation, a project, a research project of your own. So your choice widens as you go through the year, and you can find out all the gory details of that on the website. So I hope you found this interesting and useful. And if it was not, or if it was confusing or something like that, then just give our admissions office an email, and Josephine and or myself can help answer the questions. So I'd just like to say thank you very much, Josephine, for doing this. And you know, you didn't need to because you finished, but you came back for more.